I arrived at 6:12 in the morning just as the bulldozer lunged at the steel door. My uncle stood there, clutching papers and grinning like he had won the lottery. He claimed the warehouse was abandoned, but when I snatched the permit, his name was nowhere on the owner line. Instead, I saw a forgery of my own signature under the consent to demolish. This was not a teardown, it was a frame job. My name is Kendall Graham, and at 35 years old, I knew exactly what panic tasted like. It tasted like stale coffee and the metallic tang of adrenaline hitting the back of my throat. I was doing 70 miles per hour in a 40 zone, my knuckles white against the steering wheel of a Ford Fusion that had seen better decades, let alone better days. The heater rattled, blowing lukewarm dust into my face, but I was shivering. The text message had come in at 5:45 in the morning, buzzing against the nightstand like an angry hornet. It was from an unknown number. 5 words that had pulled me out of a dead sleep and threw me into my clothes before my eyes could fully adjust to the dark. Your warehouse is being processed. Processed. That was a sterile, bureaucratic word for something violent. I took the turn onto Riverside Row too fast, the tires screaming in protest against the cracked asphalt. This part of the city always smelled of brackish water and diesel fumes, a graveyard of industry where the city skeleton was exposed. The sun was just bleeding over the horizon, casting long, bruised shadows across the shuttered factories and chain-link fences. But ahead, the scene was unnaturally bright. Floodlights were cutting through the morning mist, and the ground was vibrating. I saw the fence first. It was a temporary chain-link setup, the kind that appeared overnight like steel weeds. Zip-tied to the mesh was a bright orange sign that made my stomach drop into my shoes. Demolition in progress. Behind the fence, a yellow bulldozer sat like a prehistoric beast, its engine idling with a low, guttural growl. It was positioned directly in front of the rolling steel door of the warehouse my grandmother had left me. I slammed the brakes, the Fusion skidding to a halt just inches from the temporary barrier. I was out of the car before the engine died, leaving the door wide open. The air was cold, biting through my thin windbreaker, but the heat coming off my face could have melted snow. "Hey," I shouted, my voice cracking. I ran toward the fence, grabbing the cold metal links. "Stop. You cannot be here. This is private property." A man in a hard hat and a reflective vest looked up from a clipboard. He looked bored, the way men look when they are just doing a job and do not want to hear a woman screaming at 6 in the morning. He pointed a gloved hand toward the side of the lot. "Talk to the owner, lady." I followed his finger, and that was when the rage truly set in. Hot and blinding. Standing near the cab of a pickup truck, looking as crisp as a fresh banknote in a bespoke Navy suit that cost more than my car, was Wade Mercer, my uncle. He was holding a travel mug of coffee in one hand and a thick folder in the other, watching the bulldozer with a look of supreme satisfaction. He looked like he had just won the lottery and was surveying his prize. "Wade," I screamed his name, scrambling around the edge of the fence where they had left a gap for the machinery. He turned slowly, a rehearsed smile spreading across his face. It was the smile he used for investors, for zoning boards, and apparently, for the niece he was trying to rob. "Kendall," he said, his voice smooth, carrying easily over the rumble of the idling engine. "You are late. We were about to get started." I stopped 3 feet from him, breathing hard. The exhaust from the bulldozer was choking me, or maybe it was just the sheer audacity of the man standing in front of me. "Get started on what?" "This is my building." "Wade, what is that machine doing here?" He took a sip of his coffee. Unbothered. "It is a safety hazard. Kenny, look at it. The roof is sagging. The foundation is cracking. The city has been on my back about it for months. We are just doing what needs to be done. It is abandoned. I am cleaning up the family mess, as usual." He said it with such conviction that for a split second, I questioned my own reality. That was Wade's gift. He could tell you the sky was green with such confidence that you would look up and squint, just to check. But I knew this building. I knew every brick, every rusted bolt. "It is not abandoned." I snapped. stepping into his personal space. I was here 3 days ago, and it is not your property to clean up. It belongs to Graham Storage, LLC. That is me, not you. Wade sighed, a sound of dramatic patience, as if he were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. He tapped the folder in his hand. The city disagrees. Dangerous structure, public nuisance, emergency demolition order. It is all here, signed, sealed, and delivered. I tried to call you, Kendall, but you never pick up, so I handled it. Let me see it. I did not wait for him to offer. I lunged for the folder. Wade tried to pull it back, a flash of annoyance breaking his composure, but I was faster, and fueled by pure desperation. I ripped the file from his grip, papers crinkling in my fist. Careful, he warned, his voice dropping an octave. That is official city documentation. I ignored him, my hands shaking as I flipped open the cover. My eyes scanned the pages frantically, looking for the lie. I knew it was there. Wade never did anything strictly by the book. He just knew which pages of the book to tear out. The top sheet was a demolition permit issued by the Department of Buildings. It looked authentic. The embossed seal, the heavy cardstock, the stamps. My eyes raced down to the line for property owner. It should have said Graham Storage, LLC, or, if he had somehow managed to steal the deed, it would say Mercer Development. But it said Graham Storage, LLC. I frowned, confusion momentarily dampening my anger. If it listed my company, how could he authorize this? My eyes dropped further. To the bottom of the page, to the section marked Owner Consent for Demolition. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. There, in black ink, was a signature. Kendall Graham. It was my name. It was my loop on the K, my sharp slash on the G. It looked exactly like the signature I had put on my driver's license, on my lease, on 1,000 compliance reports at work, but I had never seen this piece of paper in my life. I looked up at him, my vision blurring at the edges. You forged my signature. Wade chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Do not be dramatic. You probably signed it weeks ago in that pile of transfer papers Mom sent over. You forget things. Kendall, you are stressed. It happens. I did not sign this. I said, my voice low and dangerous, I would never sign this. Wade stepped closer, lowering his voice so the demolition crew could not hear. It is done. Kendall, the permit is active. The crew is paid. You are going to walk away. And we are going to turn this eyesore into something that actually makes money. I am doing you a favor. You cannot afford the taxes on this place anyway. I turned away from him, pulling my phone from my pocket. My fingers fumbled over the screen as I dialed 911. Who are you calling? Wade asked, sounding more bored than worried. The police, I spat. This is fraud. This is trespassing. Go ahead, Wade said, checking his watch. It is a civil dispute. Kenny, by the time they file a report, this pile of bricks will be rubble. I held the phone to my ear, watching the foreman climb into the cab of the bulldozer. Wait, I screamed at the worker, waving my free hand. Do not move. Police are on the way. The foreman hesitated, looking from me to Wade. Wade gave him a sharp nod. Proceed. We are on the clock. The engine roared, a cloud of black smoke puffing into the air. The metal tracks clanked as the machine lurched forward, closing the distance to the steel door. I screamed into the phone. I am at 404 Riverside Row. There is an illegal demolition in progress. I am the owner. They are destroying my property. I stood between the fence and the machine, holding my ground. The massive blade of the dozer rose, gleaming in the morning light. It was a terrifying thing, a wall of yellow steel designed to crush. Get out of the way. Lady, the foreman yelled over the engine noise. The police arrived 7 minutes later, 2 cruisers, lights flashing, cutting through the morning gloom. I felt a surge of relief, thinking this nightmare would pause. I was wrong. The officers who stepped out looked tired. They approached us slowly, hands resting on their belts. One of them, a sergeant with gray stubble, looked at the shouting match between me and the foreman. Okay, shut it down for a second, the sergeant ordered. The bulldozer idled down. "Officer," I said, stepping forward, thrusting the clipboard I had stolen from Wade toward him. "This man is trying to bulldoze my building. He forged my signature on this permit. I am the owner. I did not consent to this." The sergeant took the clipboard. He looked at the permit, then at Wade. Wade stepped in. Smooth as silk. "Officer, I am Wade Mercer. This is my niece. She is a little emotional. We have a valid permit issued by the city. The building is structurally unsound. We are under strict orders to clear the lot for public safety. Here is the engineering report." He pulled another document from his jacket pocket. He had backups, of course, and handed it over. The officer glanced at it. It looked official. It had stamps. It had red ink. "She says she did not sign it," the officer said, looking at the signature. "She is confused," Wade said, flashing a sympathetic smile at me. "It is a family trust issue. We are handling it, but the city order is mandatory. If we do not clear this today, the fines start at $10,000 a day." The officer looked at me. "Ma'am, if the permit is valid, this is a civil matter. You need to take it up in court. We cannot stop a permitted demolition based on a verbal claim of forgery." "But it is right there," I pleaded, pointing at the paper. "I am telling you, that is not me. You have to stop them." "We can take a report," the officer said, handing the clipboard back to Wade. "But we cannot obstruct a city safety order without an injunction." Just then, a white sedan pulled up to the curb, tires crunching on the gravel. The door opened, and a man in a neon yellow vest with city building inspector stenciled on the back stepped out. He moved with a suspicious amount of urgency. I had dealt with city inspectors before in my job. They were usually overworked, slow, and impossible to get on the phone. This man had arrived within 15 minutes of the machinery starting. That was not efficiency. That was an appointment. "What is the holdup?" the inspector barked. Marching over. "I am Inspector Vance. We are on a tight schedule here. This structure is a level 4 hazard. Why is that blade not moving?" I stepped in front of him. "I am the owner. This permit is based on a forged signature." Inspector Vance did not even look at me. He looked at the sergeant. "Officer, remove this civilian from the safety zone. If she obstructs this demolition, she is liable for endangering public welfare. We have a collapse risk here." He turned to me then, his eyes cold and hard behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ma'am, you are trespassing on a demolition site. If you do not move your vehicle and step back behind the barrier, I will have you cited for obstructing a municipal operation. The fines are substantial. The walls were closing in." Wade stood there with his arms crossed. The victor. The police were backing off, deferring to the city official. The inspector was practically pushing me back with his glare. I realized then that shouting would not work. Tears would not work. The law, in this specific, twisted moment, was not on my side because the law was reading the paper, not the truth. "I need a minute," I said, my voice shaking. I need to get my things." "It is an empty warehouse," Wade said, checking his watch again. "You said so yourself. Kendall, there is nothing in there but rats and dust." I looked at him. The way he said empty made the hair on my arms stand up. He was too insistent. He wanted that building gone, and he wanted it gone fast. I took a step back, pulling my phone out again. I did not call anyone. I opened the camera. I stepped close to Wade, catching him off guard. Before he could pull the clipboard away, I snapped 3 high-resolution photos of the permit. I captured the signature. I captured the permit number, and then I saw it. In the bottom right corner of the document, there was a tiny tracking code, a string of numbers and letters generated by the city's digital filing system. Created 10:23 p.m., the date next to it was from 2 days ago, 48 hours. Wade had not been planning this for months. He had rushed this through the system in 48 hours. You do not rush a demolition permit in 48 hours unless you are paying someone to type while you hold the cash. "That is enough," Inspector Vance snapped, stepping between me and Wade. "Officer, escort her to her vehicle." The sergeant put a hand on my shoulder. "Come on, Miss Graham, do not make us arrest you." I looked at the warehouse one last time. The morning sun was hitting the rusted corrugated metal. It looked tired. It looked old. But inside, behind those walls, was the only thing my grandmother had explicitly told me to protect. Wade was lying. He said it was empty. He said it was dangerous. But you do not bring a bulldozer at 6 a.m. for safety. You bring a bulldozer to bury something. I shook off the officer's hand and walked backward toward my car. Go ahead, I said, staring straight at Wade. Knock it down. Wade's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. He did not expect me to yield. He expected me to cry. I got into my Ford Fusion and slammed the door. As I put the car in reverse, the bulldozer engine roared again, louder this time. I watched through the windshield as the metal blades smashed into the side of the building. The sound was like a scream, metal tearing and brick crumbling. Wade was not clearing land. He was destroying evidence, and he had just made the mistake of thinking I was the same person whose signature he had stolen. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white again. He thought the warehouse was the target. He did not realize that by tearing it open, he had just started a war. I drove away as the first wall collapsed, dust billowing into the air like a smoke signal. I was not leaving to hide. I was leaving to reload. I sat in my Ford Fusion 3 blocks away from the demolition site, watching the dust settle over the tops of the chain-link fences through my rearview mirror. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel so hard that my fingers ached. I needed to drive, to go to work, to pretend that my entire world was not being dismantled by a yellow bulldozer. But my body refused to cooperate. I was frozen by a cocktail of rage and a lifetime of conditioning that told me I was the one who was wrong. That was the Mercer family way. If Wade did something, it was visionary. If I did something, it was a mistake. For 35 years, I had been the family footnote, while the Mercers were loud, charismatic, and prone to flashy displays of wealth that may or may not have been liquid. I was the quiet one. I was the boring one. I worked as a compliance analyst at Crestline Claims and Title. It was a job that sounded as dry as it felt. I spent 40 hours a week staring at insurance adjustments, title transfers, and zoning variances, hunting for the 1 decimal point that did not belong. My mother, Elaine, always told people I worked in office administration because it sounded less like I was a glorified librarian of mistakes. My salary was $45,000 a year, which was enough to pay rent on a 1-bedroom apartment and keep my 10-year-old car running. But in the eyes of my family, I was hovering just above the poverty line. Wade, on the other hand, was the golden god. He called himself a real estate developer, though I had never actually seen him build anything from the ground up. He was a flipper, a middleman, a guy who knew a guy at City Hall, at every Thanksgiving dinner for the last 2 decades. I had to listen to Wade hold court at the head of the table, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet, talking about how he had just had lunch with the deputy mayor or how he was reshaping the skyline. He was the sun, and the rest of us were just cold little planets hoping for some warmth. And then there was Britt. My cousin Britt was 10 years younger than me and lived her entire life through the lens of a smartphone. She was an influencer, which meant she took photos of latte art and sponsored skincare products for an audience of 50,000 strangers. Britt was the princess to Wade's king. She had the Mercedes. She had the condo downtown. She had the audacity to look at me with pity. I remembered the last time I saw them, just 3 months ago at my mother's birthday dinner. I had mentioned I was going to the warehouse on the weekend to sort through some boxes. Britt had laughed. A tinkling, cruel sound that stopped the table conversation. She asked why I still held on to that pile of garbage. She said I was hoarding a literal ruin. She told me it was embarrassing that the only asset in my name was a breeding ground for tetanus. Wade had joined in, shaking his head with mock sympathy. He told me that holding on to dead assets was why poor people stayed poor. He said I should let him take it off my hands for a nominal fee, just to save me the liability insurance. They did not understand. They never understood. My grandmother, Rose Mercer, had been the only one who saw through the smoke and mirrors of her own son. When she passed away 5 years ago, the family expected Wade to get everything. Instead, she had quietly transferred the deed of the old industrial warehouse on Riverside Row into a limited liability company called Graham Storage. and she had named me the sole member. I could still hear her voice, raspy from age but sharp as a tack, telling me not to sell. She called it my anchor. She said that in a family full of balloons floating away on hot air, I needed something heavy to keep me on the ground. And it was not empty. That was the lie that made my blood boil the hottest. Wade had told the police and that inspector that it was an abandoned shell. It was not. It was my sanctuary. The front half was filled with grandmother's actual estate, the antique furniture Wade thought was too old-fashioned to sell. Boxes of family photo albums that Britt did not care about because they were not digital. And crates of my grandfather's old tools. But the back corner, under the skylight that still had most of its glass, was mine. I had set up a modest studio there. It was nothing fancy, just some easels, a drafting table, and shelves of supplies. On weekends, I let a local art collective use the space for free to paint sets for community theater. It was not a crack den. It was not a collapse hazard. It was a quiet, dusty, beautiful place where I felt like I actually owned a piece of the world. I finally put the car in gear and drove. But I did not go to work. I called my supervisor at Crestline and told him I had a family emergency. It was the truth. The emergency was that my family was trying to rob me. I drove to a diner on the edge of town, ordered a black coffee, and opened my laptop. I needed to stop thinking like the victim and start thinking like a compliance analyst. Wade was greedy, but he was not stupid. He would not risk a felony forgery charge just to clean up an eyesore. He did not care about safety. Wade cared about leverage. I pulled up the city's urban planning maps on the public domain. It was slow, clunky software, but I knew how to navigate it better than most city employees. I zoomed in on Riverside Row. For years, it had been zoned as light industrial low value, high tax, hard to develop. But then I saw it. There was a proposed amendment to the zoning code, filed 6 weeks ago, scheduled for a final council vote next month. The proposal was to rezone the entire Riverside waterfront district to mixed-use residential and commercial. My heart hammered against my ribs. If that zoning passed, the land my warehouse sat on would not be worth $200,000 as a storage lot. It would be worth $3 million as a site for luxury condos with river views. Wade knew. Of course he knew. His friends at the city had probably tipped him off before the paperwork was even drafted. He needed the title. He needed the land clear. And he needed me out of the way before I realized I was sitting on a gold mine. But he could not buy it from me because I had refused to sell for 5 years. So he decided to destroy the building, slap me with demolition liens and safety fines I could not afford to pay, and then force a distress sale to cover the debt. It was evil. It was brilliant. And it relied entirely on me being too passive to fight back. I closed the map and opened my email. I searched for my grandmother's name. I missed her terribly in that moment. I wanted to ask her why she had given me this burden. I scrolled past the funeral arrangements, past the condolence notes. I went back to the year she died. There was one email with the subject line for a rainy day. I had read it once, years ago, and thought it was just sentimental rambling. I opened it again. My dearest Kendall, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are likely feeling overwhelmed. I know Wade. I know he looks at the world and sees only what he can take from it. I left the warehouse to you because you are the only one who knows the value of keeping things safe. But listen to me closely. Wade is a shark. If he ever circles you, if he ever tries to force you out, or if you ever see anyone in a hurry to clear out that building, you need to go to the back office. In the floor safe, there is a blue metal lockbox. I have taped the key under the drawer of the old workbench. Do not open it unless you have to, but if they try to bury the truth, the key is yours. Love, Gran. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. If you ever see anyone in a hurry to clear out that building, Wade had rushed a demolition permit in 48 hours. He had brought a bulldozer at dawn. He was not just in a hurry. He was in a panic. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the diner's air conditioning. This was not just about the zoning. Wade could have just offered me $500,000 and I might have considered it. But he went straight to destruction. He went straight to a felony. Why? Because there was something in that warehouse he did not want me to find, or there was something he wanted to destroy before anyone knew it existed. The blue lockbox. I closed my laptop with a snap. My hands were steady now. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Wade thought he was dealing with Kendall the failure, Kendall the poor relation who would cry and sign whatever he put in front of her to make the shouting stop. He thought he was dealing with the black sheep, but he had forgotten what I did for a living. I did not build things. I audited them. I found the cracks in the foundation. I found the missing signatures. I found the lies buried in the fine print. If he had forged my signature, he had created a paper trail. And if there was a paper trail, I would find it. I checked the time. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. The permit office downtown would be a nightmare of lines and bureaucracy, but that was my battlefield. I was not going back to the warehouse today. It was too hot, too guarded. But tomorrow morning, I was going to walk into the Department of Buildings and Safety. I was going to pull the original file. I was going to look at the ink on that page, and I was going to prove that Wade Mercer was a liar. And then, once I had the law on my side, I was going to find out what was in that blue box. I left a $5 tip for a $2 coffee and walked out to my car. The Ford Fusion might have been old, and my bank account might have been low. But for the first time in my life, I did not feel poor. I felt dangerous. The Department of Buildings and Safety was located in a brutalist slab of concrete downtown, a building designed to make you feel small before you even walked through the metal detectors. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and the air inside already smelled of stale coffee, photocopier toner, and low-grade desperation. I pulled a paper ticket from the dispenser, number 42. The red digital counter above the intake windows read, number 4. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my knees bouncing with a nervous energy I could not suppress. I had spent the last hour at an internet cafe, printing out the documents from the LLC, my identification, and the tax records, proving I was the sole signatory for Graham's storage. I had a binder. It was color-coded. This was my language. I might not know how to drive a bulldozer or schmooze a city councilman at a gala, but I knew how to navigate a bureaucracy. Bureaucracies were just machines made of paper, and every machine had an off switch if you knew where to press. 2 hours and 12 minutes later, my number flashed on the screen. I walked up to window 6. The clerk was a woman with frizzy hair and glasses on a chain, looking at me with the aggressive indifference of someone who had 10 years until a pension. I need to see the physical case file for a demolition permit issued yesterday, I said, sliding a slip of paper with the permit number under the glass partition. The address is 404 Riverside Row. She typed the number into her terminal with agonizing slowness. One finger at a time. Click, click, click. That is a sealed active site, she said without looking up. Emergency demolition order, public safety hazard. I am the owner, I said, pressing my driver's license against the glass. And I did not file that permit. I want to know who did. She squinted at the screen. The system says the applicant is Calhoun Redevelopment Partners. The name meant nothing to me. It sounded like a shell company, generic and sterile. Who is the signatory for Calhoun, I asked. She sighed, finally looking at me. Ma'am, I cannot give you personal details of a third-party applicant. That is privacy policy. I felt the heat rising in my neck, but I forced it down. Losing my temper here would get me escorted out by security. I needed to be the smartest person in the room, not the loudest. It is my property, I said, my voice level. If a third party filed a permit on my land, they committed fraud. I need to see the application. I need to see the wet signature on the consent form. We do not have the physical file here, she said, already reaching for the button to call the next number. It is in processing with the field team. You can file a dispute online. It takes 6 to 8 weeks. I did not move. I am not filing a dispute, I said, pitching my voice to carry just enough that the supervisor at the back desk looked up. I am filing a request under the Freedom of Information Act and the State Public Records Law. I want the immediate release of all documents, correspondence, and photos related to permit number D7729. I am also formally notifying you that any destruction of these records is a felony offense. The clerk froze. The magic words had been spoken. You could yell at city workers all day. But when you cited the specific statutes regarding public transparency and record retention, the atmosphere changed. The supervisor stood up. She was a tall woman in a sharp gray suit that looked out of place among the polyester uniforms. Her name tag read Darla Klein, Senior Case Manager. She walked to the window, her heels clicking on the linoleum like hammer strikes. She dismissed the clerk with a nod and looked at me. Her eyes were cool, intelligent, and entirely unamused. "You are Ms. Graham?" she asked. "I am." Darla Klein looked at my binder, then at my face. She was assessing me, calculating how much trouble I was going to be. "We processed that permit on an expedited basis because the structural report indicated an imminent collapse risk," Darla said smoothly. "We do not usually hand over raw files while an operation is active. Usually is not the law." "Ms. Klein," I countered, "the law says I have access to records regarding my own property within 24 hours. I am here now. I will wait." She held my gaze for a long moment. It was a silent duel. She was trying to intimidate me, to make me feel like a nuisance who was interfering with serious city business. But I stared right back. I dealt with compliance audits for a living. I knew how to hold a stare. "Fine," she said, her lips thinning, "but you cannot remove anything from the office. You can view it in the side room. No photos of staff." She disappeared into the back. 20 minutes later, she returned with a thick manila folder. She placed it on a table in a small, glass-walled room off the main lobby. "You have 30 minutes, she said. I opened the file. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. The first few pages were standard: application forms, fee receipts paid in cash, which was unusual for a legitimate developer, and then I found the engineering report that justified the emergency demolition. It was signed by a structural engineer I had never heard of, someone named Arthur P. Vance. The report was filled with dire terminology: catastrophic load failure, eroded foundation, severe water damage. Then I turned the page to the photographic evidence. There were 6 glossy photos stapled to a card. They showed a brick wall with a massive crack running down the center, a rotted wooden beam hanging from a ceiling, and a pile of debris that looked like a collapsed roof. I stared at the first photo. Something was wrong. I leaned closer, squinting at the details. The photo showed a brick column with the number 14 stenciled on it in faded white paint. My warehouse only had 10 columns. I flipped to the next photo. It showed a wall covered in graffiti. The tag was a bright green skull with a crown. I knew every inch of my building. The local kids tagged the back wall, but they used silver and blue, and the specific artist who worked in my neighborhood signed his work, Ghost. I had never seen a green skull in my life. I felt a cold shockwave hit my chest. These were not photos of my warehouse. They had taken pictures of some other ruin, probably miles away, and slipped them into the file to justify the emergency order. This was not just a mistake. This was evidence fabrication. I pulled out my phone. "No photos," Darla Klein said from the doorway. She had been watching me. I looked up at her. "This file is fraudulent. Ms. Klein, these photos are not of my building. My building does not have column number 14. Darla did not blink. She did not look surprised. She looked bored. The inspector verified the site conditions. "Ms. Graham, if you disagree with the assessment, you can hire your own engineer to file a counter-report. But until then, the city stands by its findings." She reached for the file. I slammed my hand down on top of it. "I am not done. You are wasting your time," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "And you are making a lot of noise about a building that is going to come down anyway. Sometimes, it is better to just let the system work." "Is that advice?" I asked. "Or a threat?" She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Just an observation. Your 30 minutes are up." I left the office shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking with the thrill of the hunt. They had slipped up. They were arrogant. They thought nobody would look closely at the before photos once the building was a pile of rubble. I needed an expert. I could not just claim the building was safe. I needed a stamp that carried as much weight as the city's. I sat in my car and searched for structural engineers. I skipped the big firms that likely had contracts with the city. I looked for the guys who handled litigation support, the ones who got paid to argue. I found a name, Miles Rourke. His website was terrible, just black text on a white background, but his bio said he had 30 years of experience and specialized in forensic engineering. I called him. He picked up on the second ring. Rourke here. I need a structural assessment immediately. I said, today, I have a demolition order based on false photos. I charge $300 an hour. 4-hour minimum for emergency callouts. He rumbled. And I do not lie for clients. If your building is a dump, I will write that it is a dump. That is exactly what I want. I said, I want the truth. I met Miles Rourke at the site 2 hours later. He was a bear of a man, wearing worn-out coveralls and carrying a laser measure that looked like a weapon. He did not shake my hand. He just nodded at the warehouse. That the victim, he asked. That is her. The demolition crew was still there, eating lunch by the bulldozer. They watched us with suspicion. Miles spent an hour crawling through the warehouse. He climbed a ladder to check the trusses. He banged on the brickwork with a mallet. He took hundreds of photos. When he came out, he was wiping dust from his beard. It is old, he said, putting his tools away. Needs pointing on the south wall. Roof membrane needs a patch. But dangerous, no. This thing is built like a tank. The load-bearing capacity is double what modern code requires. Whoever said this was in danger of imminent collapse is either blind or lying. Can you put that in a report, I asked? By tonight I will have it stamped and emailed by 5. He said. As Miles drove away, I sat in my car to upload the photos I had taken of his inspection. I had bought a dashcam on my way over, a high-end model that recorded audio and video, and I had suction cupped it to my windshield. A white city truck pulled up. It was not Inspector Vance this time, but another man in a uniform. He walked up to my car window and tapped on the glass. I rolled it down 2 inches. You cannot block the entrance, he said. I am on the public easement. I replied, I am legally parked. He leaned in, his face too close to the glass. Look, lady, you are racking up fines. Every hour this crew waits is billable time. The city is going to put a lien on your property so deep you will never dig out. Why don't you just go home? I pointed to the camera on my windshield. The red recording light was blinking steady and bright. Everything you say is being recorded and uploaded to a cloud server. I said, including your threat to financially penalize me for exercising my right to inspect my own property. State your name and badge number for the record. Please. The man's eyes flicked to the camera, then back to me. He sneered, straightened up, and walked away without a word. I watched him go. He pulled out his phone immediately, dialing a number and pacing angrily by the fence. I sat back in my seat, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving me cold and lucid. It was not just Wade. Wade was a hustler, but he was not organized enough to fake engineering reports, coordinate with the permit office, and have inspectors running interference for him all in 48 hours. Someone inside the Department of Buildings was helping him. Darla Klein knew about the fake photos. I saw it in her eyes. The inspector knew the building was safe. Calhoun Redevelopment Partners was the shield they were all hiding behind. This was a pipeline, a machine designed to steal property, sanitize the deed, and hand it over to developers, leaving the original owners buried in paper and debt. Wade had brought me into a game I did not know how to play, but he had made a critical error. He assumed I would play by the rules of a family drama, shouting, crying, appealing to emotion. He did not know I had switched games. I was not a niece anymore. I was an auditor, and I had just found the first discrepancy that would bring the whole ledger crashing down. I started the engine. I needed to get home. I needed to send Miles's report to a lawyer, and I needed to find out who was really behind Calhoun Redevelopment Partners. Because if my family was willing to destroy me for a piece of land, then I was willing to burn their little kingdom to the ground to save it. The text message from my mother, Elaine, arrived at 4:30 in the afternoon. It was not a question. It was a summons. Dinner at 6. Wade is here. We are going to settle this like a family. I sat in my car outside my apartment complex, staring at the screen. My stomach churned with a specific type of nausea reserved for family gatherings where I knew I was the main course. I wanted to drive in the opposite direction, perhaps until I hit the ocean, but I knew I could not. If I did not show up, Wade would spin the narrative unchecked. He would paint me as the hysterical, ungrateful niece who was obstructing his benevolent attempt to save the family from financial ruin. I had to go. I had to be the rock in the stream of their madness. My mother lived in a pristine beige stucco house in the suburbs, a place where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and silence was considered a virtue. I parked the Ford Fusion behind Wade's massive black truck. It looked like a predator sitting in the driveway. When I walked inside, the smell of pot roast hit me. It was the scent of my childhood Sundays, a smell that used to mean safety but now just smelled like obligation. They were already seated at the dining room table. Wade was at the head, of course, a napkin tucked into his collar, looking for all the world like a king holding court. My mother sat to his right, her hands clasped nervously on the tablecloth, and across from her sat my cousin Britt. Britt did not look up when I entered. She was adjusting a small tripod set up on the table next to her salad plate, the ring light reflected in her eyes, giving her a robotic, glazed look. "You made it," Wade said, his voice booming. "Sit down, Kendall. Elaine made your favorite." I did not sit. I stood by the archway, clutching my purse like a shield. "I am not here to eat." "Wade, I am here to tell you that I went to the permit office today. I know about the fake photos. I know about the rushed application." Wade chuckled, cutting into a slice of beef. He chewed slowly, making me wait. "Always so dramatic," he said, gesturing with his fork. "Sit down, Kenny. You're making your mother nervous." Elaine looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Kendall, just sit. Wade explained everything to me. He is trying to help you." I looked at my mother. She was 60 years old but looked 10 years younger thanks to a rigorous regimen of denial and avoidance. She hated conflict. She would agree to set herself on fire if it meant everyone would stop shouting. "He is not helping me." "Mom," I said, my voice tight. "He forged my signature on a demolition permit. He is trying to destroy the warehouse Gran left me." Elaine sighed. A long, tragic exhalation. "Wade told me about the debts. Kendall, he told me the warehouse is falling down and that the city is going to fine you thousands of dollars. He is paying for the demolition out of his own pocket to save you from bankruptcy. Why can't you just say thank you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. "Debts?" I asked. "I do not have debts on that property. The taxes are paid. The insurance is current." Wade wiped his mouth. "You do not have debts yet," he corrected. "But you will. That place is a money pit. I am liquidating a distressed asset so we can sell the land and I can cut you a check. You should be happy. You can finally buy a car that does not sound like a lawnmower." I turned to Britt. She was whispering into her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "What are you doing?" I asked. Britt looked up, blinking innocently. "Just updating the fam." She turned the screen toward me. It was a live stream. The caption read, "Dealing with toxic family drama. Some people would rather hold on to trash than let others grow. Real talk family burdens. Put that away." I snapped. Britt rolled her eyes. "See, so aggressive. This is exactly what I was talking about. Guys, she is literally yelling at me at the dinner table." I looked back at Wade. He was smiling. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach his eyes. He was enjoying this. He had the audience. He had the moral high ground. And he had the power. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printout of the permit I had photographed. I slammed it onto the table, right next to the gravy boat. "Explain this," I demanded. "That is not my signature. That is a felony." "Wade, it is called forgery." Elaine flinched as if I had thrown a grenade. "Kendall, stop it. Stop throwing papers around." Wade did not even look at the paper. He took a sip of his wine. "Paperwork is just paperwork. Kendall," he said dismissively, "in the real world, in the world where big boys do business, it is about intent. My intent is to develop that land. The city agrees with me. The neighbors agree with me. The only person standing in the way of progress is you. It is illegal. I insisted, feeling like I was speaking a foreign language. You cannot just fake consent because you think you know better. Wade leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. The jovial uncle mask slipped, revealing the shark beneath. You think a judge cares about a signature when the building is already gone? He asked softly. By the time you get a court date, that warehouse will be a parking lot. And who are they going to believe me? A respected developer with a track record of improving this city, or you, a low-level analyst who hoards a dangerous ruin out of spite? I am not hoarding it, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It is my property, and I know why you want it gone so fast. I saw the zoning proposal. Wade froze. For the first time, the fork paused halfway to his mouth. I know about the rezoning. I continued, pressing my advantage. I know the land is going to triple in value next month. You are not trying to save me. You are trying to steal the equity before I figure out what it is worth. Wade put the fork down. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Even Britt stopped tapping on her phone. You think you are so smart, Wade hissed, his voice dropping to a low growl. You sit in your little cubicle checking boxes, thinking you understand how the world works. You have no idea what is at stake here. I know you are greedy. I said, greed. Wade laughed, a harsh barking sound. It is not about greed, you stupid girl. It is about survival. If that warehouse stays standing, if people start poking around inside those walls. He stopped. I watched his eyes. They flickered. He had said too much. If people start poking around inside? What I asked. My heart beating faster. Wade composed himself. Picking up his wine glass again, the liquid swirled. Dark red like blood. Nothing, he said. It is a safety hazard. That is all. But I had heard him. He did not say if the deal falls through. He did not say if we miss the market window. He said if people start poking around. He was afraid of something inside the building. Wade took a long drink, then set the glass down with a deliberate clink. Let me give you some advice, Kendall, because despite your behavior, you are still family. He leaned back, crossing his arms. I know your boss at Crestline. Gary, isn't it? We play golf at the club on Tuesdays. My stomach dropped. Gary is a good man, Wade continued, his eyes locking onto mine, but he relies on my recommendation for a lot of his commercial title business. If I were to mention that his compliance analyst is unstable, litigious, and potentially involved in insurance fraud regarding a dilapidated property, well, I imagine your position might become redundant very quickly. I stared at him. He was threatening my livelihood. He was threatening to burn my entire life down just to get his way. Elaine looked down at her plate. She heard it. She heard him threaten me, and she said nothing. She just cut her roast beef into tiny, manageable pieces. That was the moment the last thread of familial obligation snapped. I looked at my mother, shrinking into her chair. I looked at Britt, performing her victimhood for an audience of strangers. And I looked at Wade, the monster who wore a suit. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I picked up the photo of the permit, folded it neatly, and put it back in my purse. Enjoy your dinner, I said. Where are you going? Elaine cried out, half rising from her chair. Kendall, please, just apologize to your uncle. Let him handle it. I walked to the door. I am going to handle it. Mom, my way. I heard Wade's voice as I opened the front door. Walk away. Kendall, but remember what I said. Monday morning. That building comes down, and if you are in the way, you get buried with it. I closed the door on them. The night air was cool, but I was burning up. I sat in my car for a moment, breathing deeply, waiting for the shaking to stop. Wade had made a mistake. He thought threatening my job would make me back down. He thought fear was a leash, but he had given me the one thing I was missing: confirmation. If people start poking around, there was something in the warehouse that Wade was terrified of. It was not just the land value, it was evidence. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. 8:15. I was not going home. I put the car in gear and drove toward Riverside Row. The industrial district was pitch black at night. save for the occasional flicker of a street lamp that had not been shot out. I parked the Fusion 2 blocks away, tucked behind a dumpster in an alley. I did not want the demolition crew or the private security Wade had likely hired to see my car. I changed into the sneakers I kept in the trunk and pulled on a dark hoodie. I felt ridiculous, like I was playing a character in a movie, but the reality of Wade's threat made everything feel sharp and immediate. This was not a game. This was war. I approached the warehouse from the rear, moving through the overgrown weeds of the adjacent lot. The chain-link fence the crew had erected did not go all the way around the back. They had gotten lazy, assuming the riverbank was a natural barrier, but I knew the path along the retaining wall. I had played here as a kid while Gran did inventory. The massive silhouette of the warehouse loomed against the night sky. It looked wounded, the scar where the bulldozer had hit the door visible even in the dark. I reached the back access door. It was rusted shut to the casual observer, but I knew the trick. You had to lift the handle up, not push it down. I held my breath and lifted. The mechanism groaned, a low protest of metal on metal. I froze, listening. From the front of the lot, I could hear the murmur of voices. Security guards. They were smoking. I could smell the acrid drift of cigarettes. I slipped inside and pulled the door shut behind me. The silence inside was absolute. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, engine grease, and the distinct sweet rot of damp wood. I clicked on my small keychain flashlight, shielding the beam with my hand. I was in the main storage bay. Shadows stretched long and distorted across the floor. I moved quickly, stepping over the debris from the initial bulldozer strike. My destination was the office in the back corner. It was a small, glass-enclosed room raised on a platform, overlooking the floor. I climbed the stairs, testing each one before putting my weight down. The wood held. The office was exactly as I had left it last week, though a layer of dust from the demolition attempt now covered everything. My grandmother's old desk sat in the center. I knelt behind the desk. In the floor safe, there is a blue metal lockbox. I pulled back the threadbare rug. Beneath it was a floorboard that looked loose. I pried it up with my fingers, breaking a nail in the process. There it was, a small floor safe, embedded in the concrete. I knew the combination. It was my birthday. Gran had been sentimental like that. I spun the dial. Right to 10, left to 23, right to 89. Click. The heavy steel door swung open. I reached into the dark cavity. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was a blue cash box, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $20. It was heavy. I sat back on my heels, the box on my lap. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Wade was ready to destroy a building, ruin my career, and tear our family apart to keep this box buried. I took the small silver key from my pocket, the one I had found taped under the workbench where Gran said it would be. I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying snap. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no money. There were no jewels. There was a stack of documents, a USB drive, and a thick envelope with my name written on it in Gran's shaky handwriting. I picked up the envelope. On the back, written in bold, underlined letters, were instructions. If Wade touches the warehouse, give this to a lawyer. I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. It was a loan agreement. I shone my flashlight on the text. It was dated 5 years ago. Borrower Wade Mercer. Collateral Graham Storage Warehouse, 404 Riverside Row. I frowned. Wade couldn't use the warehouse as collateral. He didn't own it. Gran owned it. Then I saw the signature at the bottom, Rose Graham. But it wasn't Gran's signature. It was shaky. Yes, but the slant was wrong. It looked like someone trying to write like an old woman. I flipped to the next page. It was a transcript of a recording, and then a title report that looked doctored. I realized then what I was holding. Wade hadn't just forged my signature yesterday. He had been forging signatures for years. He had taken out a massive loan against this property before Gran even died, using fake authorization. If the warehouse was sold or demolished legally, the title search would be superficial. The loan would be paid off from the proceeds, and the fraud would disappear. But if I kept the warehouse, The loan would eventually come due. The bank would come looking, and they would realize the collateral had been pledged by a dead woman who never signed the papers. Wade wasn't just hiding a zoning play. He was hiding bank fraud. He was hiding a felony that carried a 10-year prison sentence. I closed the box and hugged it to my chest. Outside, a flashlight beam swept across the high windows of the warehouse. Did you hear that? A voice shouted from the yard. I clicked off my light. I sat in the dark, clutching the blue box. Fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard determination. Wade had told me that paper was just paper. He was wrong. This paper was a weapon, and I was about to aim it right at his heart. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dusty air of the office like a scalpel. Outside, the voices of the security guards had drifted toward the front gate, their laughter fading into the hum of the distant highway. I was alone in the dark, but the silence inside the warehouse felt heavier than usual. It was the silence of a tomb that had just been cracked open. I sat on the floor with the blue cash box in my lap. Inside, nestled next to the loan agreement I had just glimpsed, was a small brass key. It was taped to a piece of cardstock with a single word written in my grandmother's distinctive, looping script evidence. I knew exactly what this key opened. In the corner of the office, buried under a stack of old architectural blueprints and moth-eaten dropcloths, stood a gray metal filing cabinet. It was an ugly, utilitarian thing that had been there since the 80s. I had ignored it for years, assuming it held nothing more than expired invoices and tax returns from the Clinton administration. I crawled over to it, keeping below the window line. As I pulled the dusty canvas away, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Across the seam of the top drawer, someone had slapped a red adhesive label, "Sealed per court order. Do not open." I froze. A court order. I leaned closer, shining the light on the sticker. The paper was cheap, peeling at the corners. The font was standard Arial, printed on what looked like a home inkjet printer. There was no case number, no judicial seal, no issuing county. It was a prop. Wade had been here. He or one of his lackeys had put this sticker here to scare me off. They relied on the fact that Kendall, the good girl, Kendall, the rule follower, would see a legal warning and back away with her tail between her legs. But they forgot that my job was to analyze legal documents for a living. I knew what a real seal looked like. This was a sticker you could buy at an office supply store. I jammed the brass key into the lock of the filing cabinet. It turned with a harsh, grinding click. I ripped the sticker in half as I pulled the drawer open. It was not full of old tax returns. It was arranged with the precision of a criminal defense file. Front and center was a thick manila envelope. On the front, Gran had written, "If Wade touches the warehouse, give this to a lawyer." My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a sudden, overwhelming wave of grief. She had known. She had known for years that her son was a vulture, and she had spent her final days building a fortress of paper to protect me. I opened the envelope. First came the title report. It was a copy, but the relevant sections were highlighted in yellow. It showed a lien against the property recorded 5 years ago. Mortgage encumbrance, $750,000. Lender Shadow Creek Private Equity. Signatory Rose Mercer. I stared at the number. $750,000. Wade had not just borrowed a little money, he had leveraged the entire value of the property and then some. I flipped to the next document. It was a scan of the promissory note. The signature at the bottom read, Rose Mercer. But the slant was wrong. The pressure points were wrong. It was a forgery, and not even a particularly good one. Then I found the USB drive. It was taped to the bottom of the file folder. I pulled my laptop from my backpack. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I plugged in the drive. There were 3 folders: emails, invoices, and audio. I opened the audio folder first. There was a single file dated 6 months before Gran died. I put my earbuds in and clicked play. The sound of static filled my ears, followed by the clinking of teacups. Then, my grandmother's voice, frail but steady. "I am not signing it. Wade, I told you no." Then Wade's voice. He sounded younger, more desperate, stripped of the polished veneer he wore at dinner parties. "Mom, you do not understand. The market is shifting. I am overextended on the Bayside project. I just need you to sign the restructuring agreement. It is just paper. It releases the equity so I can float the loan for another 6 months." "It is not just paper," Gran snapped. "It is theft. I saw the bank statements you tried to hide. You took a loan out on this building 3 years ago. You forged my name then. And now you want me to sign this so you can cover your tracks before the audit." "I did it for the family," Wade shouted. The audio spiked, distorting his voice. "If I default, they take everything. Do you want me to go to jail?" "Is that what you want?" "I want you to stop lying," Gran said, her voice dropping to a whisper that hit me harder than a scream. "I am not signing, and I am changing my will. The warehouse goes to Kendall. If you want to steal it from her, you will have to look her in the eye and do it." Kendall Wade scoffed. "She is a mouse. She won't know what to do with it. She is smarter than you," Gran said, "and she is honest. Something you forgot how to be a long time ago." The recording ended. I sat there in the dark, tears streaming down my face. I wiped them away angrily. The puzzle pieces slammed into place. Wade did not just want the land for the zoning increase. That was just the bonus. The real reason he needed the warehouse demolished immediately was the loan. The note was likely coming due, or Shadow Creek Private Equity was demanding an inspection of the collateral. If the bank inspectors came here and spoke to me, I would tell them I never authorized a loan. The fraud would be exposed. Wade would go to prison for bank fraud and forgery. But if he bulldozed the building, he could claim the structure was dangerous and had to be destroyed. The insurance policy, which he had probably taken out in secret, would pay out for the loss of the building. That money would pay off the loan. The pile of rubble would be sold to developers. The evidence of the forgery would be buried under tons of brick and steel. And the worst part, I realized what his plan was for me. He had forged my signature on the demolition permit. If the bank ever investigated, Wade would say I didn't destroy the collateral. Kendall did. "See, here is her signature on the permit. She panicked and destroyed the building to hide the fact that she was the one who took out the loan." He was going to frame me. He was going to pin a $750,000 fraud on me, claiming I was the one who took the money and then destroyed the building to get the insurance payout. That was why he mentioned my job. That was why he called me unstable at dinner. He was already planting the seeds of the narrative. My niece, the black sheep, the financial failure, got desperate and committed arson by bulldozer. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. Solid and heavy as a stone, I was not a mouse, I was a compliance analyst. And I had just found the non-conformance report of the century. I packed everything the blue box, the files, the USB into my backpack. I wiped the handle of the filing cabinet with my sleeve. I slipped out of the back door, moving like a ghost through the tall grass. I did not breathe easily until I was back in my car. Doors locked, driving away from the river. I drove to a 24-hour parking lot near the university, somewhere bright and public. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in 6 months. Tessa Vaughn picked up on the third ring. Her voice was raspy. I had probably woken her up. "Graham, it is midnight. You better be in jail or at a hospital." I found the ledger. "Tessa," I said. The sleep vanished from her voice instantly. Tessa and I had gone to college together. She was now an assistant district attorney in the fraud division. She was the smartest person I knew, and the most ruthless when it came to white-collar crime. "What are you talking about?" Tessa asked. "Wade," I said. "My uncle? He forged a mortgage on my grandmother's warehouse 5 years ago. $750,000. He is trying to bulldoze the building tomorrow to hide the collateral deficiency before the loan balloons. And he forged my signature on the demo permit to frame me for the destruction of asset." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the rustle of sheets as she sat up. "Do you have proof?" she asked. "I have the original title report." I said, "I have the forged promissory note. And I have an audio recording of him admitting to the first forgery and trying to coerce my grandmother into a cover-up." "Kendall," Tessa said, her voice dropping to her professional register. This is not a family dispute anymore. This is a felony. This is bank fraud, wire fraud, and grand larceny. I know, I said. But I need to stop the demolition. The temporary restraining order will not hold if he has people on the inside. He has a permit. He has a corrupt inspector. Tessa hummed. A sound of calculating logic. The historical documents prove he is a criminal. Yes, but to nail him to the wall to make sure he goes away and does not just settle out of court with a fine, we need to prove the current conspiracy. We need to link the old fraud to the new permit. What do I do? We need to catch him pulling the strings, Tessa said. We need proof that he knowingly paid for that permit and directed the forgery now. If we can prove he bribed a city official to expedite a fraudulent demolition, we have him on RICO. That is federal. That is no bail territory. I thought about the tracking code on the permit. I thought about Darla Klein's cold eyes. I can get that. I said, do not do anything stupid. Kendall, Tessa warned, bring the box to my office first thing in the morning. We will start the paperwork. But we need a kill shot. We need him to think he has won so he gets careless. He thinks he has won, I said, looking at the city skyline. He thinks I am just a scared little girl with a pile of bricks. Good, Tessa said. Let him think that, because when we drop the hammer, I want him to be smiling right up until the handcuffs click. I hung up. I looked at the backpack on the passenger seat. It looked like ordinary luggage, but it contained the destruction of the Mercer family legacy. Wade wanted a war. He wanted to bulldoze me off the map. He had no idea that I was the one holding the detonator. Tessa Vaughn did not just give me legal advice. She gave me a weapon named Dante Ruiz. I met Dante at 7 o'clock the next morning in a coffee shop that smelled of burnt toast and wet pavement. He did not look like the private investigators I had seen in movies. There was no trench coat, no fedora, and no air of noir mystery. Dante was a short, wiry man in his 40s wearing a hooded sweatshirt and expensive running shoes. He looked like a marathon runner who had taken a wrong turn into corporate espionage. He slid a thin tablet across the scratched table before I had even taken a sip of my tea. Calhoun Redevelopment Partners is a ghost, Dante said. His voice was raspy, the voice of a man who spent too much time talking on burner phones. I looked at the screen. It displayed a corporate registration page. I ran a deep skip trace. He continued. The company was incorporated 48 hours before the permit application was filed. The registered agent is a service in a strip mall in Delaware. The physical address listed on the application belongs to a laundromat in Queens. There are no employees, no assets, and no credit history. It is a shell. Kendall, a paper mask. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. I knew it. Wade is hiding behind it. Dante tapped the screen, not just hiding, insulation. If the demolition goes wrong, or if the city sues for damages, Calhoun Redevelopment Partners declares bankruptcy and dissolves. Wade walks away clean because his name is not on a single piece of paper. He is using a burner company to destroy your property. We need to link him to it, I said. We need to prove he is the one pulling the strings. I am working on the money trail. Dante said. Shell companies cost money to set up. Someone paid the filing fees. Someone paid the registered agent. I will find the credit card or the bank transfer. But that takes time. What is your timeline? The bulldozer is parked at my front door. I said, I have hours, not days. Then you need to stop the clock, Dante said. Closing the tablet cover, you need a judge to freeze the site. I spent the next 3 hours in the stifling atmosphere of the county courthouse, huddled in a conference room with Tessa. She had taken a personal day to help me file for an emergency temporary restraining order. We were armed with the structural report from Miles Rourke and the evidence of the fake photos. The hearing was at 1:30 in the afternoon. It was not a trial, just a hearing in chambers before Judge Harrison, a man who looked like he had been carving stone tablets when the 10 Commandments were written. Wade was not there. Instead, he had sent a lawyer, a man named Sterling who wore a suit that cost more than my annual salary. Your Honor, Sterling began, his voice dripping with condescension, this is a frivolous attempt to obstruct a necessary public safety measure. The structure in question is a death trap. My client, acting as a concerned family member and developer, is simply trying to mitigate a hazard. He is not the owner, Tessa countered, her voice sharp and clear. And the hazard is fabricated. We have a certified report from an independent structural engineer stating the building is stable. The photos in the city file are fraudulent. Judge Harrison peered over his spectacles. Fraudulent photos. That is a serious accusation. Ms. Vaughn, we have proof, Tessa said, handing over Miles's report and the side-by-side comparison of the graffiti. The photos in the permit file are not of the Graham storage warehouse. This permit was obtained under false pretenses. The judge frowned. Looking at the documents, Mr. Sterling. Sterling did not flinch. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. We dispute the claim that Mr. Mercer has no authority, Your Honor. While Ms. Graham is the technical owner of the LLC, she executed a limited power of attorney 6 months ago, granting Mr. Mercer full authority to manage real estate assets in the event of, and I quote, financial distress or inability to manage estate affairs. He slid the paper toward the judge. My heart stopped. A power of attorney. I had never signed a power of attorney. Let me see that, I said, my voice rising. Sterling slid a copy toward me. I looked at the document. It was dated January 15th. It gave Wade Mercer absolute power to sell, lease, or demolish property owned by Graham Storage, LLC. And at the bottom was my signature. It was perfect. It was not the shaky forgery I had seen on the loan documents in the blue box. This was sharp. It had the slight hesitation on the upstroke of the K. It had the specific heavy dot on the I in my middle name. It looked exactly like the signature I used on my tax returns. It is a forgery, I whispered. Sterling smiled. It is notarized. Ms. Graham. I looked at the notary stamp. Elena Rostova. I did not know an Elena Rostova. This is a lie, I said, looking at the judge. I never signed this. I was in Chicago on January 15th for a compliance conference. I can prove it with flight records. Judge Harrison looked at the paper, then at me. Ms. Graham, a notarized affidavit carries significant weight. However, given the conflicting engineering reports and the allegation regarding the photos, I am granting a temporary stay. The demolition is paused for 72 hours. Only 72 hours, Tessa asked. That is the standard for an emergency TRO, the judge said. You have 3 days to bring me definitive proof that this power of attorney is invalid, or that the permit was illegally obtained. Otherwise, the order dissolves, and Mr. Mercer is free to proceed. We walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. I felt sick. He is getting better at it. I said to Tessa, that signature, it was terrifying. It looked like mine. It is a digital lift, Tessa said. Her face grim. He probably took a high-resolution scan of your signature from a birthday card or an old check, cleaned it up in Photoshop, and printed it onto the document. It is hard to detect without a forensic handwriting analyst. I have 3 days. I said, I cannot hire a forensic analyst and get a report in 3 days. No, Tessa said. We need something faster. We need to catch him in the act. I went back to my apartment, but I did not rest. I turned my living room into a war room. I spread the documents from the blue box on the floor, the old forged loan, the recording transcript, and placed the new power of attorney next to them. I was a compliance analyst. Spotting discrepancies was my job. I pulled out my magnifying glass and a stack of my own canceled checks from the last 5 years. I started comparing the signature on the power of attorney to my real signatures. It was too perfect. That was the flaw. Human beings have natural variance. No two signatures are geometrically identical. If you overlay 2 genuine signatures, they will never match perfectly. I scanned the power of attorney signature into my laptop. Then I scanned a check I had written to my landlord in December. I overlaid them in an image editor. They were a 100% match. Every curve, every pixel aligned perfectly. It was a copy-paste job. He had stolen my signature from that specific check number 402, and pasted it onto his fabricated legal document. I had the proof of forgery. But as Tessa had said, proving a document was fake in court took time. I needed to prove the conspiracy. I needed to prove who helped him. My phone buzzed. It was Dante. "Check your secure email," he said. "You are going to want to see this." I opened my laptop. Dante had sent a video file. Subject, the handoff. Time, 8:45 p.m. Location, the Onyx Room. I clicked play. The video was grainy, shot from a distance, likely from a button camera or a phone propped up on a table. It showed the interior of a dimly lit, upscale bar. In the corner booth sat Wade. He looked agitated. He was checking his watch every few seconds. A woman walked into the frame. I recognized the sharp gray suit. I recognized the posture. It was Darla Klein, the senior case manager from the permit office. She sat down opposite Wade. She did not order a drink. Wade leaned in, speaking rapidly. The audio was muffled by the ambient noise of the bar, but Dante had run a filter to enhance the voices. Stalled. Wade was saying, "She got a TRO. You said the paperwork was bulletproof. I said the permit was processed," Darla replied, her voice cool. "I cannot control a judge. You told me she was a nobody. You did not tell me she would hire a lawyer. She is a nobody." Wade spat. "She is just making noise. I need that building down by Monday. If the bank inspectors see it standing—" "That is your problem," Darla said. I expedited the file. I swapped the photos. I did my part. Wade reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick white envelope. It was bulky. "Here," Wade said, sliding it across the table. 5,000? Just like we agreed. Make sure the file stays lost if she files another request. And tell Vance to get his ass back out there the second the TRO expires." Darla took the envelope. She peeked inside, nodded, and slipped it into her purse. "If this goes south—" "Wade, I do not know you," she said. The video ended. I sat back, my heart pounding against my ribs. We had him. We had the bribe. We had the admission of swapping the photos. We had the connection between Wade and the corrupt city official. I called Tessa immediately. I saw it. She said, picking up on the first ring, "Dante sent it to me too. This is it." "Right," I asked. "We can arrest him. We have enough for an indictment," Tessa said slowly. "But Kendall, listen to me." There was a hesitation in her voice that scared me. "What I asked, if we arrest him now, we get him on bribery and maybe document fraud. He makes bail in 24 hours. He hires a team of lawyers to suppress the video. He claims the money was a consulting fee. He drags this out for 2 years while you go bankrupt paying legal fees. Then what do we do?" "We need the felony that puts him away for 10 years without bail," Tessa said. "We need to catch him executing the fraud. We need him to try to destroy the building after he knows you have caught him. I do not understand. Kendall, think about the narrative he is building," Tessa said. "He has a power of attorney. He has a permit. If the building goes down, he is going to claim you did it. He is going to claim you destroyed the collateral to claim the insurance money because you were broke." I felt the blood drain from my face. The loan fraud. The insurance fraud. He was setting me up to take the fall for $1 million crime. "He wants you to be the criminal," Tessa said. "So we have to let him play his hand. We have to let him think he has won. We need him to walk into that warehouse, or order that bulldozer forward, while we have law enforcement watching. We need to catch him in the act of destruction." "So we wait?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We bait him," Tessa corrected. "We make him think you have given up. We make him think the TRO is going to expire and you are walking away. We make him confident. Arrogant men make mistakes when they think they have won." I looked at the documents on my floor. I looked at the signature that was mine, but not mine. Wade had spent his whole life thinking I was weak. He thought I was the good girl who followed the rules. He thought he could bulldoze my life like he tried to bulldoze my warehouse. I felt a shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it was hardening into something useful. It was becoming strategy. "Okay," I said into the phone. "I know how to do that." "How?" Tessa asked. "He wants me to be the failure," I said. He wants me to be the niece who could not handle the pressure. So I will be her. I will surrender. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. Wade was out there somewhere, probably celebrating his cleverness, drinking expensive scotch paid for with stolen money. He wanted a show. He wanted to be the hero who saved the family from my incompetence. I would give him his show. I would give him exactly what he wanted. Right up until the moment I snapped the trap shut, I picked up my phone and opened the messaging app. I typed a message to Wade. "You win. I can't afford the lawyer anymore. Let's talk." I hesitated for a second, my thumb hovering over the send button. Once I sent this, there was no going back. I was inviting the wolf into my house. I pressed send. The response came 10 seconds later. "Smart girl. Come to the launch party tomorrow night. We will sign the papers." I stared at the screen. The launch party. The Mercer Horizon night. He was going to announce the project on the land he did not own yet. He was so confident. I put the phone down. I needed to sleep. I needed to be fresh for tomorrow. Because tomorrow night, I was going to walk into the lion's den, and I was going to smile while I locked the door from the inside. I sent the text message at 4:15 in the afternoon. It was the hardest thing I had ever typed. Not because the words were difficult, but because they tasted like ash in my mouth. "You win. I cannot afford the legal fees anymore. I am drowning. I just want to negotiate a settlement before I lose everything." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the send button. This was the white flag. This was the surrender. If Wade was the predator I knew him to be, he would not just accept it. He would want to parade it. He would want to display his victory like a trophy hunter mounting a head on the wall. I pressed send. His reply came 3 minutes later. It was not a text. It was a digital invitation. Mercer Horizon night. The grand ballroom at the Westin. 7 o'clock. Dress to impress. We will announce the settlement to the partners. Do not be late. I looked at Tessa, who was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, wearing headphones connected to a sleek black receiver. He took the bait. I said. Tessa nodded, her face grim. Of course he did. Narcissists cannot resist an audience. He does not just want your land. Kendall, he wants your submission. He needs to show the world that he brought the rebellious niece to heel. Dante Ruiz was standing by the window, adjusting the collar of a tuxedo that looked surprisingly natural on him. He held up a small, silver pin that looked like a generic piece of costume jewelry. "It is a unidirectional microphone," Dante explained, handing it to me. "Pin it to your lapel. It has a range of 50 feet. I will be in the room as a caterer. Tessa will be in the van outside recording the feed." "Is this admissible?" I asked, pinning the device to the black dress I had pulled from the back of my closet. "State law allows for one-party consent if there is a reasonable suspicion of a felony in progress," Tessa said. "Plus, we are not relying solely on the audio. Dante is your witness. We just need him to say it loud enough for the microphone to catch the inflection. We need the arrogance. Kendall, we need him to feel so safe that he tells the truth." I arrived at the Westin at 7:30. The valet line was full of luxury sedans and sports cars. A massive banner hung over the entrance, Mercer Development Reshaping the Riverfront. I walked up the red carpet. My stomach was doing somersaults, but I forced my face into a mask of tired resignation. I had to look beaten. I had to look like a woman who had spent the last 3 days crying over a checkbook. Near the entrance, a ring light was blindingly bright. Britt was there, holding her phone out at arm's length, talking to her followers. She wore a shimmering gold dress that cost more than my car. "So excited for tonight, guys," she was saying, her voice pitched high and fake. "My dad is about to make a huge announcement. We are finally clearing out the old junk to make way for the future. And guess who finally decided to show up and stop being a hater?" She swiveled the camera toward me as I approached. "Oh, look, it is Cousin Kendall," Britt smirked. "Did you finally realize that you cannot stop progress?" I stopped. I looked at the camera, then at Britt. I slumped my shoulders slightly, letting the exhaustion show. "I am just here to talk to Wade," I said quietly. "I do not want any trouble." Britt rolled her eyes, talking back to her screen. See, I told you guys. Some people just want attention until the bill comes due. Then they come crawling back. She waved me past like I was the help. Go on in. Dad is holding court by the champagne tower. Try not to depress everyone. I walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of black suits and cocktail dresses. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. A jazz band played softly in the corner. The air smelled of expensive perfume and money. And there he was. Wade stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a group of men who looked like bankers and city officials. He was laughing, a glass of scotch in one hand, gesturing broadly with the other. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. I took a deep breath. Arrogant men make mistakes when they think they have won. I walked straight toward him. Wade saw me coming. The laughter died on his lips, replaced by a smile that was pure predator. He opened his arms wide. Kendall, he boomed, silencing the conversation around him. Everyone. Look who it is. My niece. The prodigal daughter returns. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me in tight. His grip was hard, painful. It was a warning disguised as a hug. I am glad you came to your senses, he whispered in my ear. I pulled away gently, keeping my eyes downcast. I did not have a choice. Wade, I said, my voice trembling just enough. The lawyer said I could not win. The city is on your side. I want it to be over. Wade beamed, turning to the men around him. See, family, we have our disagreements, but in the end, we all want what is best for the legacy. Gentlemen, this is Kendall. She has agreed to transfer the final rights to the Riverside property so we can break ground on Monday. A round of polite applause rippled through the circle. One of the men, a heavy-set guy with a red face, raised his glass. To the Mercer Horizon project. That land is a gold mine, Wade. Good job clearing the hurdles. I waited for the applause to die down. I needed to isolate him, but not too much. I needed him to feel the safety of the crowd, but speak the truth of the conspiracy. Can we talk? I asked. Just for a minute. Before I sign anything, Wade checked his watch. He was impatient, but he was also enjoying this. He nodded. Excuse us, gentlemen. Just some housekeeping. He guided me away from the center of the room, toward a high-top table near the bar. It was quieter here, but we were still visible. I saw Dante moving through the crowd with a tray of empty glasses. He stopped about 10 feet away, his back to us, cleaning a spill on a table. He was in position. Wade took a sip of his scotch. You look tired. Kendall, I told you this would happen. You should have just taken the offer 6 months ago. I looked at him. I needed to push the right buttons. I needed to question his competence so he would brag about his control. I am tired, I admitted. But Wade, I am scared. Scared of what? The permit. I said, I saw the paperwork at the office. The signature. It is not mine. And the photos were fake. What if the city finds out? What if they audit the file after the demolition? Wade laughed. It was a low, dismissive chuckle. He leaned in closer, invading my personal space. Kendall, grow up. Do you think buildings get built in this city by following every little rule? The city is not going to audit the file. But my name is on it, I insisted, letting a note of panic rise in my voice. If they find out it is forged, I could go to jail. Wade shook his head, looking at me with pity. Nobody is going to jail. Kenny, the permit is solid because I paid to make it solid. The photos. The inspector. They are just details. I handled it. I touched the lapel of my dress, ensuring the microphone had a clear path. But are you sure the permit stands up? I asked. Are you sure the ownership line is clear? The deed is still in the LLC's name. Wade sighed, putting his glass down on the table with a sharp clink. He was getting annoyed with my stupidity, which was exactly what I wanted. Listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. The name on the permit does not matter. I control the ink. I control the people stamping the ink. By Monday afternoon, that warehouse will be a pile of rubble, and the paperwork will be buried in the archives where no one looks. He took a step closer, his eyes cold and hard. Besides, he added, a cruel smile playing on his lips, why are you so worried about your name being on the permit? You should be grateful. Grateful, I asked. Grateful that you forged my signature. Wade looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in until I could smell the alcohol on his breath. Think about it. Kendall, if anything goes wrong, if the EPA finds asbestos, or if the bank starts asking questions about that loan Gran supposedly took out, whose name is on the demo permit, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The twist. Yours, he said, poking me in the chest with a manicured finger. I froze. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Wade smirked. He thought he was teaching me a lesson in business. He thought he was showing me how the world really worked. I set it up for you. Kenny, he said, the permit, the power of attorney, everything. It is all in your name. If the investigation comes, it points to you. You are the owner. You are the one who ordered the demolition. You are the one who destroyed the collateral. I stared at him. The coldness of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing the land. He was building a firewall made of my life. You are framing me. I said, you are setting me up to take the fall for the bank fraud. Wade shrugged. It is called risk management. The LLC takes the hit. You declare bankruptcy. Maybe get a slap on the wrist for negligence. I buy the land from the court auction for pennies on the dollar. The project moves forward. The family wins. He picked up his drink again. So stop whining about the signature, he said. It is the only reason you are still relevant to this deal. Now, are you going to smile and shake hands? Or do I have to call your boss at Crestline and tell him you are under investigation for insurance fraud? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had eaten Sunday dinner at my house for 30 years. There was no love in his eyes. There was only calculation. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The fear was gone. He had said it. He had admitted to the bribery, the forgery, and the intent to frame me. And he had done it into a microphone recording to a cloud server monitored by an assistant district attorney. I took a deep breath. I understand. Wade, I said, it is all very clear now. Good, Wade said, patting my cheek. I knew you were smart enough to figure it out eventually. Now, wipe that look off your face. The deputy mayor is here, and I want to introduce you. I stepped back. No, I said. Wade frowned. Excuse me, I am not meeting the deputy mayor. I said, my voice strengthening. And I am not signing anything. Wade's eyes narrowed. We just had a deal. Kendall, do not make a scene. There is no deal. I said, there never was. I turned to walk away. Wade grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. You walk out that door, and I will ruin you. He hissed. I will have that building down by noon tomorrow, and you will be facing 10 years for fraud. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. Let go of me. Wade. He held on for a second longer, testing me. Then he shoved me away. Go home, little girl. He sneered. Go home and wait for the wrecking ball. I turned and walked away. I did not run. I walked through the crowd, past the champagne towers, past Britt, who was still talking to her phone. Oh, she is leaving already. Britt narrated as I passed. Guess the pressure was too much. I walked out the double doors and into the cool night air. A black van was parked at the curb. The side door slid open. Tessa was sitting there, wearing headphones, a laptop open on her knees. Dante appeared from the shadows of the valet stand, slipping into the passenger seat. Tessa looked at me. She pulled the headphones down around her neck. Did we get it? I asked. Tessa smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Every word. She said, risk management. I control the ink. You are the one who destroyed the collateral. It is crystal clear. Kendall, we have him on conspiracy, wire fraud, and intent to commit a felony. I leaned against the side of the van, my legs finally giving way. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking. So we can arrest him, I asked. Tessa looked at the waveform on her screen. We could, she said, but remember what we talked about. The law is about narrative. Right now, we have a tape. A tape can be argued. A tape can be claimed as hypothetical business talk. She looked at me. To bury him. Kendall, we need the action to match the words. He told you he was going to bulldoze it tomorrow regardless of the law. He told you he controls the city. He is going to try to do it. I said, exactly. Tessa said, he is going to violate the restraining order. He is going to use his corrupt inspector to force the demolition. And when he does, Dante finished. Turning from the front seat, we will be there, not with a tape recorder, with a SWAT team. Tessa handed me a bottle of water. Go home. Kendall, get some sleep. Tomorrow is Monday, and it is going to be a very long day for Wade Mercer. I looked back at the hotel. I could see the lights of the ballroom, the silhouettes of the people dancing. Wade was in there, celebrating. He thought he had bullied me into submission. He thought I was going home to cry. He didn't know that I wasn't going home to hide. I was going home to prepare the stage for his final performance. I took a sip of the water. It was cool and clean. I am ready, I said. I got into my car. As I drove away, I saw a notification pop up on my phone. It was an email from Miles Rourke, the engineer. Subject site security update. Message, I installed the vibration sensors you asked for. If anyone touches that building, you will know before they even start the engine. I smiled. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Now, all I had to do was wait for the wolf to come for breakfast. Sunday morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sky was a bruised purple, clearing slowly into a pale, indifferent blue. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and 4 cups of black coffee. Sitting on the floor of my living room while Dante Ruiz paced back and forth like a caged tiger. We had the recording. We had Wade's admission. But Dante, being the pessimist that made him an excellent investigator, was not satisfied. He had spent the night digging into the metadata of the city files we had scraped. He stopped pacing and threw a printout onto the coffee table. We were looking at the wrong head of the Hydra, Dante said. His voice was gravelly from exhaustion. I looked at the paper. It was a hierarchy chart of the Department of Buildings. Darla Klein's face was circled in red, but Dante had drawn a thick black line connecting her to a man higher up the chain. Darla Klein is a middle manager, Dante explained. She can shuffle paperwork and lose files, but she does not have the authority to override a structural safety hold. Only a director can do that, and she definitely does not have the power to assign an emergency demolition crew on a weekend. He tapped the photo of the man at the top. Meet Deputy Director Nolan Pierce. I recognized the name. I had seen it on the bottom of the zoning proposal maps. Pierce signed off on the emergency variance. Dante said, and here is the kicker. I ran a cross-reference on his financial disclosures. He lists income from a boutique consulting firm called Riverine Strategy Group. And I asked, leaning forward, and Riverine Strategy Group received 3 payments of $15,000 each in the last 6 months. Dante said, a grim smile touching his lips, from a holding company owned by Wade Mercer. My stomach turned. It was not just a bribe in an envelope at a bar. It was a payroll. Wade had bought a deputy director of the city administration. That is why he is so confident, I whispered. He does not just have a friend in the office. He owns the office. This changes the tactical landscape, Tessa said from the kitchen, where she was reviewing case law. If Pierce is involved, the police might be hesitant to intervene. He outranks the precinct captains. He can claim it is a city operation and order the officers to stand down. So we are on our own, I asked. Not entirely, Tessa replied, but we need federal eyes on this. I am calling the FBI Public Corruption Unit, but they move slow. We need to survive tomorrow morning. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank app. Check number 402 cleared. I froze. Check 402. That was the check I had used to compare the signature. The check Wade had copied to create the fake power of attorney. I had written that check to my landlord in December. It had been sitting on my mother's kitchen counter because I had run out of stamps and asked her to mail it for me during Christmas dinner. I stared at the phone. My mother would never give Wade my check. She was weak, but she was not malicious. But someone else had been there that day. Someone who always had a phone in her hand. Someone who took pictures of everything. I stood up, grabbing my car keys. Where are you going? Dante asked. To find the leak. I said, I drove to my mother's house. The driveway was empty except for Britt's white Mercedes. My mother was at church. Britt would be sleeping in. I did not knock. I used my key and walked straight up the stairs to Britt's old bedroom, which she still used whenever she was between apartments or hiding from a breakup. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of expensive vanilla candles and stale champagne. Britt was lying in bed, scrolling through her phone, wearing a silk sleep mask pushed up on her forehead. She looked up, startled. Jesus, Kendall, do you not know how to knock? It is 10 o'clock in the morning. I did not scream. I was past screaming. I walked over to the bed and held up my phone, showing her the image of the power of attorney signature next to the check I had written. Did you take a picture of my check? I asked. The one on the counter at Christmas. Britt blinked, looking annoyed rather than guilty. She sat up, adjusting her pillows. What I do not know what you are talking about. You are being weird. Do not lie to me. Britt, I said, my voice deadly calm. Wade has a digital copy of my signature. It is an exact match to that check. The only time it was exposed was when I left it here. You were the only one in the kitchen with me. Did you take a picture of it? Britt rolled her eyes and flopped back onto the mattress. So what if I did? Wade asked me if I had any documents with your writing on them. He said he needed to verify some trust paperwork for Grandma's estate. I was helping the family. Unlike you. Helping the family, I repeated, feeling a cold shock at her casual admission. You gave him the tool to forge a power of attorney. You helped him steal my property. Britt laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. Steal, oh, please, you are such a drama queen. That warehouse is a dump. Wade is going to turn it into something actual people care about. A luxury complex. A destination. I am going to be the brand ambassador. Do you know how many followers I will get from the groundbreaking series I stared at her? She did not see a crime. She saw content. She saw a backdrop for her selfies. You sold me out for likes. I said, I did you a favor. Britt snapped. Look at you. Kendall, you are 35. You drive a Ford. You have a boring job. You are a loser. You were never going to do anything with that land. I just sped up the inevitable. You have nothing to lose because you have nothing. The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. You have nothing. For years, I had let them talk to me like that. I had let them convince me that because I was not rich, I was worthless. But looking at Britt now spoiled, empty, and morally bankrupt, I realized they were the ones who had nothing. They had no honor. They had no loyalty. They just had hunger. I took a step closer to the bed. I have something you do not have. Britt, I said softly. She raised an eyebrow. What a coupon book I have the law. I said, I swiped on my phone and brought up the statute for conspiracy to commit forgery and wire fraud. Taking a photo of a signature and providing it to someone for the purpose of forgery makes you an accessory to a felony. I said, in this state, that carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 3 years in prison. Britt's face went slack. The smirk vanished. What, no? I did not. I did not sign anything. You facilitated it. I said, and since you just admitted it to me, and since Wade is going down for bank fraud, the prosecutors are going to be looking for everyone involved. Britt sat up, her face turning pale. Bank fraud. Wade said it was just a permit dispute. Wade lied. I said, he stole $1 million, and you helped him frame me for it. When the police come for him, Britt, do you think he's going to protect you? Or do you think he is going to throw you under the bus to save himself? Britt dropped her phone. Her hands started to shake. He promised me the penthouse suite for my studio, she whispered. He promised you air. I said. I turned to leave. Wait. Britt cried out, scrambling out of bed. Kendall, wait. What do I do? You cannot let them arrest me. I have a brand partnership next week. I cannot go to jail. I stopped at the door and looked back at her. She looked very small suddenly. Then you better hope my lawyer's in a good mood. I said, and you better stay out of my way. I walked out of the house. I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollow. My own cousin had served me up on a platter because she thought I was too pathetic to fight back. I got back in my car and called Dante. Brit is confirmed. I said. She provided the signature sample. She is scared now. She might flip if we press her. Good, Dante said. But we have a bigger problem. What I have a contact in the dispatch office of the demolition company. Dante said. The work order was just updated. They are not waiting for business hours on Monday. When are they coming? 6 o'clock in the morning. Dante said. Sunrise. And they are bringing 2 dozers this time. They want it flat before the courts open at 9. They are trying to outrun the TRO. I said, exactly. Their strategy is destruction of evidence. If the building is gone, there is nothing to inspect. They will pay the fine for violating the order, claim it was a miscommunication, and walk away with the land. I gripped the steering wheel. Tessa was right. If that warehouse fell, the physical proof of the old loan fraud, the safe, the condition of the structure would be buried. It would be my word against a pile of bricks. We cannot let them touch it, I said. We can't just stand in front of the machines. Kendall, Dante warned, if Nolan Pierce is involved, he will have police there to remove you for safety reasons. They will arrest you for trespassing on your own land to clear the path. Then we need to be smarter. I said, we need to let them commit the crime without letting them destroy the evidence. I hung up and drove straight to the warehouse. I spent the rest of Sunday afternoon turning the warehouse into a fortress of surveillance. I met Miles Rourke there at 2 o'clock. He brought 3 industrial-grade vibration sensors and installed them on the main support columns. These will log any impact, Miles said. Calibrating the devices, if they hit the wall, the data will show it was a structural assault, not a collapse. It proves intent. Dante arrived an hour later with a Pelican case full of cameras. We hid them everywhere. One in the rafters, one inside the rusted electrical box outside, one in the hollow of a tree across the street. We are covering every angle, Dante said, adjusting a lens. If Wade sneaks a bribe to a foreman, if Pierce gives an illegal order, we will see it. I went to the back office. I emptied the rest of the filing cabinet. I took every scrap of paper, every old photo, every receipt. I was not leaving anything to chance. I scanned everything into the cloud, and then loaded the physical boxes into Dante's trunk. By sunset, the warehouse was empty of secrets but full of eyes. I stood in the center of the bay, looking up at the dusty skylights. The building felt fragile tonight. It was just brick and mortar. It could not fight back against steel and diesel. That was my job. Tessa called me at 8 o'clock. I spoke to the FBI contact. She said, they are interested, but they need a precipitating event. They need to see the corruption in action. They will see it. I said, Kendall. Tessa's voice was serious. You need to understand the risk. If we let them start, there is a chance they do real damage. If a wall comes down... I know. I said, it is a calculated risk. I am coming with the police. Tessa said, I pulled every favor I have. I got a writ from a different judge authorizing the seizure of equipment if they violate the TRO. But I need time to execute it. I need you to stall them. I will stall them. I promised. How I am not leaving. I said, Kendall, no. It is too dangerous. It is the only way. I said, they can arrest me. Tessa. But they cannot bulldoze a building with a human being inside. It changes it from a property dispute to attempted manslaughter. Wade is arrogant. But is he a murderer? I do not know. Tessa said quietly. With the amount of money involved, I do not want to find out. He won't kill me, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. He needs me to be the scapegoat, not the victim. I hung up and sat on the old folding chair in the middle of the warehouse. The night fell heavy and dark. The streetlights outside hummed. I thought about Gran. I thought about her telling me this place was my anchor. I thought about Wade laughing at the party, telling his friends I was a good girl who would do as she was told. I checked the cameras on my phone. They were all live. The green lights blinked in the darkness like stars. I was not the black sheep anymore. I was the shepherd, and I was waiting for the wolves. At 4 a.m, I heard the first heavy truck rumble down Riverside Row. I stood up and smoothed my shirt. I put on my safety glasses. I checked the battery on my body camera. Let them come. The ground shook at 6:14 in the morning. It was not an earthquake. It was the synchronized idle of two massive yellow bulldozers rolling down Riverside Row like tanks entering a demilitarized zone. The sun was just bleeding through the gray cloud cover, casting a flat, sickly light over the industrial park. I stood in front of the closed steel door of the warehouse, my feet planted shoulder-width apart, holding a clipboard against my chest like a shield. I was not shaking this time. Fear burns out eventually, and what is left behind is a cold, hard slag of determination. The lead bulldozer stopped 10 feet from me. The engine noise was deafening, a physical pressure against my eardrums. A white pickup truck skidded to a halt beside it, and a man jumped out. It was not Inspector Vance this time. It was a younger man, wearing a city vest that looked too new, holding a tablet with aggressive importance. "Move the vehicle!" He shouted over the roar of the engines, gesturing at my Ford Fusion, which I had parked strategically to block the secondary gate. I walked forward to meet him. I did not yell. I waited until he stepped close enough to hear my normal speaking voice. "I am Kendall Graham, the property owner." I said, "I have a temporary restraining order issued by Judge Harrison yesterday afternoon. All demolition activities are suspended for 72 hours pending a hearing." I held up the court order. The stamped seal of the county court was clearly visible. The young inspector did not even look at the paper. He tapped his tablet screen. "I have a work order here, ma'am, approved by the deputy director this morning. It says emergency hazard abatement. That overrides civil disputes. We are clearing this lot. If you do not move, we will tow your car and have you removed by force." He was reading from a script. I could see it in his eyes. He was not thinking. He was following orders. I pulled out my phone. The camera was already recording. "State your name," I said, pointing the lens at his face. He flinched, holding up a hand to block the camera. "You cannot film me. That is interference. I am on my property," I said steadily, "and you are violating a court order. I am asking you again, what is your name? And who told you that an administrative work order overrides a judicial injunction?" He hesitated. He looked back at the bulldozer operator, who was watching us with boredom. "My name is irrelevant," he snapped. "The order is in the system. Your lawyer should have filed the injunction through the portal. We show no active hold in the database. It was the classic bureaucratic shuffle. The system. The invisible god that allowed men to destroy lives without taking responsibility." I stepped closer to the bulldozer. I looked up at the operator in the cab. "Turn it off," I said. The operator laughed. He could not hear me, but he saw my mouth move. He revved the engine, a plume of black smoke shooting into the air. The blade lifted, gleaming and heavy. I looked back at the inspector. "Who gave the order?" I asked, my voice cutting through the noise. "Who told you to ignore the judge?" He looked flustered. He was young, and he was not used to people standing their ground against heavy machinery. "Look, lady, I just got the call at 5 in the morning. "Okay, Mr. Mercer said it was cleared. He said just get it done before the traffic starts." I felt a surge of triumph. There it was. "Mr. Mercer," I repeated. "Wade Mercer." "He is not a city official. Why are you taking orders from a private developer?" The inspector realized his mistake immediately. He clamped his mouth shut and stepped back. "Clear the area," he barked. "Operations are commencing." Just then, a black SUV screeched around the corner, followed by a white van. It was not the police. It was Dante. The van doors flew open, and 4 men in hard hats and high-visibility vests jumped out. They did not look like city workers. They looked like linebackers who happened to be engineers. They were carrying tripods, laser levels, and heavy-duty cameras. Dante marched up to the inspector, flashing a badge that looked official enough to cause a pause. "Site Safety Monitor," Dante announced, his voice booming. "We are documenting structural integrity and compliance. If that blade touches a single brick while we are calibrating our sensors, I will have your license pulled for reckless endangerment before you can shift gears." The inspector blinked. "Who are you?" "Independent oversight," Dante said, signaling his team. They immediately began setting up laser grids around the bulldozer, effectively boxing it in with equipment. The inspector grabbed his radio. "This is ridiculous. I am calling it in. We have obstruction. Call it in." I challenged him. Call your boss. Tell him we are not moving. 10 minutes later, a sleek silver sedan pulled up. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that was entirely inappropriate for a demolition site. He had silver hair and the kind of face that was handsome until you looked closely at the eyes. It was Deputy Director Nolan Pierce. He walked toward us with the easy grace of a politician, ignoring the mud splashing onto his Italian shoes. The young inspector looked relieved, rushing over to whisper in his ear. Pierce nodded, dismissing him, and turned to me. He put on a smile that was meant to be disarming but felt like oil slick. Ms. Graham, he said smoothly, I am Nolan Pierce. There seems to be a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. Mr. Pierce, I said, keeping my phone trained on him, I have a court order. Your crew is trespassing. Pierce sighed, a sound of paternal disappointment. He looked at the warehouse, then at me. Kendall. Can I call you Kendall? Look, we all know what this is. You are holding out for a better price. I respect that. It is business. But this building is dangerous. If it collapses and hurts one of my men, that is on you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so the cameras couldn't catch the audio clearly, or so he thought. He didn't know about the high-gain microphone Dante had clipped to the electrical box 3 feet away. Let us cut the theatrics, Pierce said softly. Wade is a difficult man. I know that. But he is willing to be generous. I am authorized to offer you a settlement. $50,000, cash, on top of the land value. We sign the papers right now. You call off your dogs, and we clear the site. Everyone wins. I looked at him. He was trying to bribe me in the middle of a demolition zone. You are offering me $50,000 to ignore a felony, I asked. Pierce's smile tightened. I am offering you an expedited permit resolution fee. Do not use ugly words. Kendall, I have a question. Mr. Pierce, I said, my voice loud and clear. Does that $50,000 come from the city budget, or does it come from the Riverine Strategy Group? Pierce froze. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a physical blow. His eyes darted to my phone, then to Dante, then back to me. I know about the consulting fees. I continued. Relentless. I know Wade has been paying you $15,000 a month to fast-track his permits and ignore zoning laws. I know you are the one who swapped the photos in the file. Pierce took a step back, his composure shattered. You should be very careful about what you say, he hissed. Slander is expensive. So is racketeering, I replied. Before he could respond, another car roared into the lot. It was Wade's black truck. He parked aggressively, mounting the curb, nearly hitting Dante's van. Wade slammed the door and stormed toward us. He looked terrible. His face was red, his tie was crooked, and there was a wild, manic energy coming off him in waves. He had lost the cool, controlled facade he wore at the party. What is going on here? Wade screamed, ignoring Pierce and marching straight for me. Why is that building still standing? I told you to level it. He turned on the inspector. Get in that cab and knock it down. Now. The inspector looked at Pierce, terrified. Pierce held up a hand. Wade, wait. We have a situation. I do not care about the situation, Wade bellowed. His spit flew. He turned to me, his eyes bulging. You. He pointed a shaking finger at my face. You ungrateful, miserable little leech. I gave you everything. I tried to save you. And this is how you repay me, by dragging strangers into family business. It is not family business. Wade, I said calmly, it is bank fraud. Wade stopped. The words hit him. He looked around at the crowd, the workers, the safety crew, the inspector. Pierce. I walked toward him. I reached into my bag and pulled out the laminated copy of the demolition permit he had filed. I held it up. Look at this. Wade. I said, get that out of my face. He snarled. Look at the owner line. I insisted, tapping the paper. It says Graham Storage, LLC. It does not say Wade Mercer. You do not own this building. You never did. I own you. Wade screamed. I own this whole family. I paid the taxes. I paid the lawyers. It is mine. It is not yours, I said. And neither is the signature at the bottom. You forged it. Just like you forged the loan documents 5 years ago. Wade's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. The veins in his neck stood out like cords. You think you are so smart, he spat. You think a piece of paper stops me? I have put millions into this deal. Millions. I am not letting a receptionist stop a $50 million development. He lunged for the paper, trying to rip it from my hands. I stepped back, keeping the permit raised. You forged my name, Wade, I said, my voice steady, pushing him to the edge. You lied to the city. You lied to the bank. And now everyone knows. You little witch, he growled. The name on the permit is not yours, I shouted, delivering the final strike. You have no right to touch this building, Wade snapped. The pressure, the money, the fear of the bank, the arrogance, it all collided in one explosive moment of truth. I paid for it, Wade roared, his voice echoing off the steel walls of the warehouse. The silence that followed was absolute. The bulldozer engines seemed to fade into the background. Every head in the lot turned toward him. I paid for that permit. Wade screamed, gesturing wildly at Pierce, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the pavement. I paid him, I paid the inspector, I bought that signature. It is my building because I bought the people who control it. He was panting, chest heaving, staring at me with wild eyes. He thought he was asserting dominance. He thought he was proving his power. He did not realize he had just signed his own confession. I lowered the paper slowly. Thank you, Wade, I said softly. Wade blinked, confusion clouding his rage. What I pointed behind him. Wade turned around. At the edge of the lot, behind the circle of construction vehicles, 3 unmarked sedans had pulled up silently during the shouting match. Tessa Vaughn stepped out of the first car. She was wearing her court blazer and a badge on her belt. Behind her, 6 officers in tactical vests moved forward, hands on their weapons, and behind them, 2 agents in windbreakers with FBI printed in yellow letters on the back. Wade froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Pierce tried to run. He took 2 steps toward his car before an officer blocked his path. Tessa walked into the center of the circle. She looked at Wade, then at me. She nodded. Wade Mercer, she said, her voice cutting through the morning air like a gavel strike. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bank fraud, bribery of a public official, and racketeering. Wade looked at me. His eyes were wide, the madness replaced by a sudden, crushing terror. Kendall, he whispered, you did this. I looked him in the eye. I did not look away. No, Wade, I said, you did this. I just made sure someone was listening. The officers moved in. They grabbed Wade's arms, pulling them behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Pierce was already in cuffs, being shoved into the back of a cruiser. The young inspector was sitting on the curb, head in his hands, weeping. Wade started screaming as they dragged him toward the car. It is my land. I did it for the family, Kendall. Tell them it was a mistake. I watched him go. I watched the uncle who had terrified me, who had belittled me, who had tried to bury me under a pile of lies. He looked small now. He looked like exactly what he was, a thief in a suit. Dante walked up beside me. He put a hand on my shoulder. We got it all, he said quietly. The admission, the connection to Pierce. It is a slam dunk. I looked at the warehouse. It was still standing. The morning sun was finally breaking through the clouds, hitting the red brick. It looked battered. It looked old. But it was still there. The bulldozer operator turned off his engine. The silence that rushed back into the lot was beautiful. Tessa walked over to me. She looked tired but triumphant. We need to go to the station for your statement, she said. But take a minute. You earned it. I nodded. I walked over to the steel door of the warehouse. I reached out and touched the cold metal. My grandmother had called it an anchor. I finally understood what she meant. It wasn't about the building. It was about holding your ground when the tide tried to pull you away. I pulled the permit from my clipboard, the one with the forged signature, the one Wade had paid for with his freedom. I crumpled it into a ball and dropped it on the ground. Then I turned my back on it and walked toward the police cars. I had a statement to give, and for the first time in my life, I was going to tell the whole truth. The silence that followed the click of the handcuffs was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with the sudden, sharp realization that the world had shifted on its axis. Wade Mercer, the man who had loomed over my life like a titan for 3 decades, was now just a man in a wrinkled suit with his hands cuffed behind his back. Tessa Vaughn did not waste a second. She stepped forward, flanked by 2 federal agents who looked at Wade with the dispassionate interest of biologists examining a specimen under a microscope. "Wade Mercer," Tessa announced, her voice ringing clear across the lot. "You are currently in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the City Police Department. We are executing a search warrant for your home, your offices at Mercer Development, and the digital archives of the Department of Buildings." Wade struggled, twisting his body to look at the officers. His face was a mask of disbelief that was rapidly crumbling into panic. "This is a mistake," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You are arresting the wrong person. This is a setup." He swung his head around, his eyes locking onto me. "She did this?" he screamed, jerking his head in my direction. "Look at her. She is the one who forged the permit. She is the one who wanted the insurance money. She lured me here to frame me. She is unstable." For a moment, the old fear flickered in my chest. It was the muscle memory of a lifetime spent being told I was wrong, that I was crazy, that I was the problem. But then I felt the weight of the flash drive in my pocket. I felt the solid ground of my own property under my feet. I walked forward. I did not shout. I did not cry. I moved with the precision of a compliance analyst closing a file. I stopped 3 feet from Wade. I looked at the lead FBI agent. "He is claiming I forged the documents," I said, my voice steady. The agent looked at me. "He claims a lot of things, ma'am." I nodded. "I would like to submit the chain of evidence into the record right now." "Officer, just so there is no confusion." I opened my bag. Dante stepped up beside me, holding the tablet that was still recording. "Exhibit A," I said, holding up the printout of the Freedom of Information Act request. "These are the photos submitted with the emergency demolition permit. They show a building with column number 14 and green skull graffiti." I pointed to the warehouse wall behind me. "My building only has 10 columns," I said, "and there is no green graffiti. The photos were falsified to fabricate a safety hazard." I dropped the paper onto the hood of the police cruiser. "Exhibit B," I continued. "The independent structural report from Miles Rourke, a licensed engineer, dated 48 hours ago. It certifies the building is structurally sound. There was no emergency. There was only a rush to destroy evidence." I placed the report on top of the photos. Wade was breathing hard now, his eyes darting back and forth. "Exhibit C," I said, pointing to Dante's tablet, high-definition video and audio recording of Wade Mercer meeting with Darla Klein on Saturday night, handing her an envelope containing $5,000 in cash to suppress the permit file. Wade flinched as if I had slapped him. "And finally," I said, looking Wade dead in the eye, "the verbal confession witnessed by 20 people and recorded by federal agents less than 5 minutes ago. You stated, and I quote, 'I paid for that permit. I bought that signature. It is my building because I bought the people who control it.'" I turned back to the agent. He admitted to bribery, forgery, and the intent to defraud the city and the bank. It is all there. Wade slumped. The fight went out of him all at once, leaving him looking old and small. He realized that he could not gaslight a federal indictment. Tessa stepped closer to Nolan Pierce, who was standing by the second cruiser, looking like he wanted to vomit. "And Mr. Pierce," Tessa said coolly, "you should know that we picked up Darla Klein 20 minutes ago at her office. She was very eager to discuss the Riverine Strategy Group. She has already confirmed that you were the primary beneficiary of the consulting fees. She gave us the ledger. Nolan, you are not a deputy director anymore. You are a co-conspirator." Pierce closed his eyes and lowered his head, accepting his fate. The arrogance that had allowed him to try and bribe me 10 minutes ago had evaporated. But we were not done. An officer walked over to the edge of the crowd where Britt was standing. She was holding her phone, but she was not live streaming. She looked terrified. "Britt Mercer," the officer asked. Britt nodded. Unable to speak. We have a warrant to seize your electronic devices as part of an ongoing fraud investigation. The officer said, we have information that you provided a digital sample of a signature used in the commission of a felony. No, Britt whimpered, clutching her phone to her chest. I did not. I was just helping my dad. I did not know ignorance of the law is not a defense, the officer said, gently but firmly prying the phone from her fingers. He dropped it into an evidence bag. I watched Britt crumble. Her entire world lived inside that phone. Without it, without the filters and the followers, she was just a girl who had sold out her cousin for a condo she would never see. Wade let out a guttural roar as the officers began to guide him toward the car. He planted his feet, fighting them. I did it for the family, he bellowed, his face twisted in anguish. I did it for us. We were going to be royalty, Kendall. You stupid girl. You ruined everything. I was building a legacy. I walked up to the window of the cruiser as they shoved him inside. I signaled for the officer to wait a second. Wade looked up at me from the back seat. There was hate in his eyes, pure and undiluted. You did not do it for the family. Wade, I said quietly, you stole from Gran. You stole from me. You framed me to save your own skin. That is not family. That is a parasite. The officer slammed the door. I turned around and saw my mother, Elaine. She had parked her car behind the police barricade and was standing there, clutching her purse with both hands. She looked from the police cars to me, her eyes wide with shock. She had heard it all. She had heard Wade confess. She had heard him blame me. She had seen the truth laid bare. She walked toward me, her steps unsteady. Kendall, she whispered, he really did it. He was going to let you go to prison. I looked at my mother. For 35 years, I had wanted her to defend me. I had wanted her to stand between me and Wade and say, that is enough. But she never did. And looking at her now, I realized she never would have. She was a victim too. But she was a volunteer victim. Yes, Mom, I said. He was going to let me go to prison for bank fraud so he could keep his reputation. Elaine covered her mouth, tears spilling over. I am so sorry. Kendall, I did not know. I thought he was trying to help. I know. I said, and that is why I could not tell you until it was over. I did not hug her. I did not ask for an apology. I realized in that moment that I did not need her validation anymore. I had validated myself. I had stood in front of a bulldozer and the entire corrupt weight of the city administration, and I had won. Tessa walked over, holding a clipboard. We need to seal the site. Kendall, she said. The FBI needs to do a full forensic audit of the warehouse contents to recover the original loan documents and the safe. We are designating it a federal crime scene. She handed me a pen. I need you to sign the consent form for the search. It also serves as a protective order. Nobody touches this land without your direct written authorization. I took the pen. I looked at the signature line. I signed my name. Kendall Graham. It was the same signature Wade had tried to steal, but this time, the ink was wet, and the hand holding the pen was steady. Done, I said, handing it back. Tessa smiled. You did good. Graham? Dante was already at the gate, removing the orange demolition in progress sign that Wade's crew had zip-tied to the fence. He threw it into a trash pile. I walked over to my car and opened the trunk. I pulled out a piece of poster board and a thick black marker. I had prepared it last night. A small act of hope. I walked to the front gate. The sun was fully up now, bathing the warehouse in a warm, golden light. The dust from the morning's commotion was settling. I taped the new sign to the fence. Private property, verified owner on file. I stood back and looked at it. Wade had spent his whole life trying to erase people. He tried to erase Gran's wishes. He tried to erase my ownership. He tried to erase me. I looked at the police cruiser pulling away, taking Wade Mercer to a place where his connections could not help him. I spoke out loud, though only the wind and the old brick walls could hear me. You wanted to wipe me off the map, Wade. But you forgot one thing. The real map does not get drawn by people like you. It gets drawn by the people who keep the records. I turned to the warehouse. I walked up to the small side door, the one I had entered in the dark so many times. I unlocked it. I pushed the door open. A shaft of sunlight cut through the gloom, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It lit up the back office where the blue box had been hidden. It lit up the sturdy steel columns that Miles Rourke had proven were strong. The warehouse was not empty. It was full of truth, and for the first time in a long time, it was safe. I stepped inside, into the light, and closed the door behind me. The war was over, and I was the last one standing. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Kendall Graham and her fight for justice. If you are listening to this, please drop a comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I love seeing our community grow across the globe. Do not forget to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay safe, and remember, always check the paperwork.